there are 10 writing rules. And I am so glad that you have joined us for this. I'm feeling a little festive with my poinsettia and so forth. So I hope you're getting excited about the holidays. And I also hope you have paper and pen, because I really have done a lot of reflecting over the last 30 years. And what have I learned along the way? And what are best practices about how we can get these ideas and stories out of our head and into the world. So I have distilled them into my 10 favorite do's and don'ts, my 10 favorite writer's rules. And now there's a rule to introduce the 10 rules. And it's this one. Please write down. This is a bonus rule. There is no one right answer. There is no one right answer. I remember at the Maui Writers Conference how crazy making it was for our participants, because Frank McCourt would get up and say, you have to work with an outline. And Dave Barry would get up and say, I'm a night owl. I don't get going until later. And Terry Brooks would get, you have to write first thing in the morning. And the next person would say, it's, and back and forth. It's like my sister, my daughter, my sister, my daughter. By the way, that's what was that movie? Thank You, with Jack Nicholson about LA something. Anyway, okay, famous line from that movie, and I'm dating myself. So the thing is, though, is that we keep getting conflicting advice, and it is crazy making. And so even though these are my rules and they're things that I've come to believe and learned the hard way, please adapt them. I bet you have your own rules, and if they work for you, run with them. And if they don't, whoop, tweak them or toss them. And now a quick example, because every rule has an example, is that this book, Someday is Not a Day in the Week. When I finally sent it off to my publisher, I went back through all my notes and all my drafts to make sure that there wasn't some gem in there that I had forgotten, something I'd said a year before that really did belong in the final version. And it was very sobering and humbling, because when I first started the book, it was called Currents, because this was from my year on the water, and it was supposed to be about water, and it's supposed to be about the currents, ever-changing currents, and etc. Well, then it changed to chase meaning, not clicks. And that was based on when my agent told me that I would get a much better deal if I had a bigger digital following, which is why I shared that New York Times article with you on our private Facebook page, because it's good news, folks. For the last 5 or 10 years, digital platform has run the show. It was the first question an agent, an editor, publisher would ask. And there were many quality people who could write quality books, who could support it over the years. They weren't interested. How many Instagram followers do you have? How many TikTok followers do you have? And it was a little bit soul-sucking. And what this New York Times article has revealed is that when Billie Eilish, who has millions of followers worldwide, is selling tens of thousands of books as opposed to millions of books, that's a concern. When all of these celebrities with millions of followers are selling books that are okay, they don't even come close to earning back the advance. Don Draper said, if you don't like what's being said, change the conversation. I think that article is going to change the conversation. I think that all of you, I know you're business owners, you're practitioners, you have a track record of success. You know how to bootstrap things. You know how to take responsibility for making something succeed over the long haul. This isn't a 6-week wonder. This is going to be, a year, 2, 5, 10 years. You're going to be out there supporting that book. I think it gives you a new chance to get a book deal based on the fact that they can trust you as a jockey who is going to take responsibility for promoting this book in perpetuity and making money for the publisher and you. So when I was in that stage, I named the book Chase Meaning, Not Clicks, because it was more like all these false gods, all these false values, and coming back to center and bringing more into our life about what would matter in the long run. And then it went through another title. And the other title was, There Is No Present Like the Time. And of course, it plays off, there is no time like the present. And I was like, no, there is no present like the time, because so many of the people I interviewed, they were putting off what was important. They were going to do it when they weren't so busy. They were going to do it when the kids went off to school. They were going to do it when they retired. And it's like, folks, there is no present like the time. You've got the time right now. In fact, you probably have more time than you're going to have later. You may not have your health later. You may not have your loved ones later. You may not have the mobility later. It's like, now is the time. And then, of course, it ended up being someday is not a day in the week. Now, here's the point. Any of those titles could have worked. I look back at my concentration book, and I looked at the very first draft I sent into my publisher. And I was thinking, all right, people who are reading a book on concentration probably have a short attention span. So I'm going to use like an Ann Landers format, because I knew that when people read a newspaper, they would go read the comics first. And you know what the second thing they would read? The advice columns, Ann Landers, Dear Abby, etc. So I thought, okay, I'll ask a question, give an answer, ask a question, give an answer, so that people with short attention spans can come in, get something, and get value, even if they only have a few minutes to spare. Well, guess what? I abandoned that format somewhere along the way. I don't know why. And when I look back, it was pretty good. So there's more than one wise answer, is that what we're going to talk about today are a lot of different ways that we can get our work out in the world. And they're always up for adaptation, and they're always up for you adopting them if they make sense, tossing them if they don't. All right, let's get to the real number one. You ready? Real number one is that writing is our offering. Writing is our offering. Is that writing is not a business card. Writing is not just a door opener for conversion, etc. Writing is our legacy. It is the pebble in the pond. And many of you know one of my favorite stories about this, about Jana Wolf. The very first year of the Maui Writers Conference, I'm walking the beach, and here's a woman crying on the beach. And I went over and I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "No, I'm not okay." I said, "Well, what's happening?" She said, "I don't belong here." I said, "You don't belong here?" She said, "Who am I to write a book? It's like I'm putting myself up on a pedestal. It feels kind of arrogant." She said, "I just don't know if I can do this." And I said, "Jana, what do you want to write about?" Well, she and her husband, Howard, had adopted a biracial child who was very challenging. And she said, we went to the bookstores, we went to the libraries to try and find books to help. And they were all these Pollyanna books about what a blessing it was to be an adoptive parent. They just made me feel worse. She said, "I want to write the book I can't find." I said, "What's an example of what you want to write about?" And she said, "I want to talk about the time that Ari is 3 years old and I fix spaghetti for dinner. And he reaches across the table and he grabs a handful of spaghetti and he throws it in my face. And my first thought was, my son would never have done that." And the shame that I felt that thought had even occurred to me. And I said, "What else?" She said, "I want to talk about when it's time to send pictures of Ari to his birth mother. Even though he's challenging, I edit out the cute ones because I live in daily fear she's going to change her mind and want him back." I said, "Jana, the question to ask is not, am I perfect? Do I have a PhD? Has it been done?" I said, "You know what the question to ask is? Would someone reading my book benefit? Because if someone reading your book will benefit, not only do you have the right to write, you have a responsibility to write. Have you ever thought about it that way? If you have lessons learned, they don't do anyone any good sitting on the laptop. That's why we write. It's not coming from arrogance. It is our offering. Here is something I've learned. Here is something I've been through. Here is something that I've observed, and I'm going to offer it in the hopes that it might add value for you. Now, if you go onto Amazon, you'll see Jana Wolf's Secret Thoughts of an Adoptive Mother. Her book has been out in the world now for more than 20 years. And I ran into Jana when I was speaking at the Hawaii Book and Music Festival a couple years ago. She said that not a week goes by that she doesn't get an email from someone somewhere around the world saying, I thought I was the only one. We write because it is an offering so that our words might resonate with people out there and they think, I'm not the only one this has happened to. I'm not the only one who feels this way. I'm not the only one going through this. And in that way, writing is a life raft to people who can cling to it in their time of need. All right, let's go on. Rule number 2. And writing isn't done at a desk. Writing isn't done at a desk. It's that over the years, I cannot tell you how many people told me that they want to write a book, but they don't have time. It's like they're busy, they're raising their family, they're working 60 hours a week, etc. Well, Jacqueline Michard, who wrote Deep End of the Ocean, she was Oprah's first pick, her very first book club pick. She picked a housewife with 5 kids for her first pick. And guess where Jacqueline Michard did her writing? At the kitchen table for the 2 hours she had to herself. When the youngest kids went off and when the youngest kids came home or the oldest kids went off, she had 2 hours every day. She plunked it down. She ignored the laundry, ignored the dishes, and she wrote for 2 hours. And she wrote Deep End of the Ocean that ended up selling millions of books, being Oprah's #1 pick. And it was because she didn't wait to write at a desk. Now, John Grisham did the same thing. John Grisham was a lawyer and he didn't have time to write, but he really wanted to write. So he got up at 5 every single morning and wrote 2 hours before he went into the office at 7:30. He wrote from 5 to 7 every morning with a time to kill, by the way, which didn't get picked up right away. His other books became a success. And then they came out with that first book that hadn't been published, and it became a multi-million-dollar bestseller as well. So writing, we do all the time. We have talked about the power of Otterdotai. Gail Sheehy, who wrote Passages, which has been selected as one of the 10 most important books in the last 50 years, was a client. Gail was a journalist. She was, along with Tom Wolfe, one of the new journalists who did a lot of work for Vanity Fair. And when I introduced her to Otterdotai, she almost cried because for years she's been interviewing people and writing things down, writing it down, or recording it. But then you still have to listen to the recording and then write it. Very laborious task, and you miss a lot of it. Otterdotai, I am not on commission, although I should be. It's free. And when you go for a walk, you can write. When you're on a plane, you can write. When you are waking up in the middle of the night, you can write. If you can talk, you can write. It does not have to be at a desk. In fact, angels whisper to us when we walk. And if we have Otterdotai, if it gets our eyebrows up, the otter goes on. That is when our voice is its most pure. In the moment when we're flush with what is happening and the words are flowing out so fast, we can hardly keep up. So writing is not done at a desk. Now I'm going to share 2 more and then I'm going to stop for a while. As Mark Twain said, no sinner was ever saved after the first 20 minutes of the sermon. So I talk for about 20 minutes, share my best practices. I want to hear a couple of yours and then we'll dive in and do the rest. Okay, number 3, comparisons cause us to quit. Comparisons cause us to quit. Comparison is the thief of joy, and comparison is the thief of the voice. William Blake said, I cannot write a book commensurate with Shakespeare. I can write a book by me. Early in my career, every single time I walked into a Borders, you remember those, along with Barnes and Noble, big box bookstores about 25 years ago. Every time I walked into a Borders or Barnes and Noble, I got depressed because I'd walk over to the self-help session or the relationship session. I would see all these books on my topic and I would think, what could I possibly say? It's all been said before. Or I would think, well, I can't write like that, or I don't have those credentials, and comparisons cause us to quit. We are not here to compare and to compete. We are here to create. Please write it down. We are not here to compare and compete. We are here to create, and comparisons cause us to quit, which means we do not create and we do not contribute, and that doesn't help anyone. So from now on, admire or aspire. If you see someone just came out with a book on your topic, someone with a lot of knowledge is writing and speaking about the same thing, say these 3 words. Good for them. Good for them. Hey, we can admire. Good. They're getting valuable work out in the world. Aspire. How can I? How can I get my work out in the world? Well, not by getting depressed and going in bed and abandoning our project. How can we create and contribute? Once again, not by getting small and shrinking with imposter syndrome and comparisons and abandoning our project. So comparisons cause us to quit. From now on, admire or aspire. Good for them, or how can I? And the next one, write to connect, not to impress. Write to connect and not to impress. Do you know that Sting had writer's block for 8 years? Sting, the musician, a Grammy award-winning musician, he said the words wouldn't come. For 8 years, he couldn't write a lyric. He couldn't write a song. So what did he do? He went home to Newcastle in England, where he grew up, by where the big ships were. And he would, on his daily walks, he would just talk with the people who worked at the shipyard. And he was so inspired by their stories and so forth. He ended up writing a musical called The Last Ship that premiered on Broadway and that won a Tony for the best script of the best music of that year in a musical. All because he got out of his head and into the field. I had an epiphany when I read that story about Sting, because I was working on my Tongue Fluid school book at that point, and it had become a grind because I was very busy speaking. I had 2 kids in high school. My life was very full, and I had a deadline, and I was grinding to meet that deadline. And when I wrote that, I thought, you know what? Writing is not supposed to be an it's not supposed to be an intellectual exercise. It's supposed to be an emotional exercise. It's not that we're lacking creativity, we're lacking connection. So I got up out of my chair. I went over to South Lakes High School, 5 minutes away, my son's high school. I interviewed the principal. What do you do when a teacher comes in and says, I quit? I interviewed teachers. What do you do when parents accuse you of favoritism? I interviewed kids. What do you do when you're getting bullied on the bus? And I came home from 1 day of interviews, and my mind was just flowing with their stories, with their needs, with their problems, with their issues. And the book took flight because I got out of my head and into the field. Please write this down. Our readers are our leaders. Our readers are our leaders. And if we have writer's block, we're probably in our head, and it's time to get out in the field. It's time to get out and to talk to people who have problems around this, who don't know how to do this, who are frustrated by this, who lay at night thinking about this, and ask them about their wishes and their hopes and their dreams and their resentments. And we will connect with our intended readers, and the faucet of flow will open and the words will start coming. Okay, so that's enough for me right now. Let's watch our time and then open it up for questions or comments or your writer's rule. So who would like to share one of your writer's rules, please? Corinne, I saw something right on the tip of your tongue. Please, let's hear.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
One of the things, well, first of all, I loved what you said about getting out of your head, because surrendering to it is something that I have learned helps me get into the flow, because I've always got a lot of things going on. So just surrender to your writing. It may not be perfect right then, but that helps me. Also, the idea of proof. This, before I used to always think, I always have these success client testimonials. I have them when I speak, the picture of the person, their quote, and all this. But then I thought when I'm writing, it needs to be fuller. It needs to be my experiences also, and maybe other people's stories. That, a Girl Scout who won an award for, around the world trip. And she learned, the power of the why, or how to ask. Well, that might tie to negotiation some way, but I never once have given that example in a talk or written it in my book. So I have recently expanded my view of proof sources.
Good for you. And yay for surrender.
Yes.
Mason, I bet you've got a writer's rule. Let's hear.
Well, picking up on some of the things you've taught me, writing can be isolating along with friendship making. So what I learned, and actually this goes back to last year, the course that I took with you, was the writing can be tough, but finding an author buddy has created a friendship that lasts to this day with Jan and her book on joy. So try to get some rhyming in there, keep the spirit going.
Oh boy, let's hear it for joy.
And then the next piece, when you said that, and I'm reading over on the other screen, our readers are our leaders. I also think that one of the things that helped me get through writer's block was interviewing more and more people, because the more people I spoke with, the more stories I had that said, oh, this actually fits into my idea for this chapter better than what I was planning to do. Mm-hmm. So that was key. We can make it isolating, and at least for me, that would have created more and more writer's block.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. It was one of the rules that didn't make it into the top 10 is that stories are our secret sauce. And if I'm working with a nonfiction author, fiction, it's all story, right? However, nonfiction, it's almost a non-negotiable. If you want a page turner, every chapter starts with a story. Because when they finish a story, they look at the next one. And if it starts off with infobesity in this chapter we're going to talk about, they put the book down. Who knows if they come back? If it starts with a story, they get drawn in and they keep getting drawn in. And I agree with you, Mason. Stories are our secret sauce. All right, let's rock and roll with some more rules. Next one is to make your life your lab. To make your life your lab. And, first Kierkegaard said, we can't understand our lives forward. We can only understand it backwards. Steve Jobs riffed off that by saying we cannot connect the dots forward. We can only connect them backwards. I disagree. Writing is connecting the dots forward. That's what it is. When our life is our lab, things happen. And if we're observant, it's like, oh, that would be a good story here. Oh, that is meant to make that. Oh, it's constantly observing new dots, connecting new dots, and creating new content. And this is based on something that I was watching CBS Sunday Morning, my favorite TV show years ago, and they had on Gavin DeBaker, who is the author of The Gift of Fear. He is a security consultant, and he often provides protection for celebrities or politicians. And the reporter asked a fantastic question. And if you do podcasts or interviews, make sure you ask this question or they ask this question. What is something surprising you've learned in your work? And he said, you know what, if we ever do have a client that's assaulted or kidnapped and we get them back, my first question to them is, did you have any warning? And guess what they all say? I knew something was wrong. But see, then their intellect overrode their instincts. They thought, I'm in an armored car. What could happen? It's broad daylight. I'm in a security detail. I'm being silly. And they would dismiss the very instincts that were warning them of danger. And I had an epiphany. I thought, if we have instincts that warn us of dissonance, don't we also have instincts that alert us to resonance? if we have a sixth sense that tells us, when something's about to go wrong, don't we also have a sixth sense that tells us when something's about to go right? And I think that's what writers do, is that we keep our antenna up and we pay attention to the nudges and we pay attention to the instincts. And when we're alerted to something, we pay attention to it, because chances are it's going to go in our work. And when we live that way and we make our life our lab, we are not writing on our own. We're partnering with the universe. That's the woo-woo part of the conversation. It's just that I don't care how left brain our authors were at Maui Writers Conference, they would all talk about, at some point, the book would come alive and take on a life of its own. Elizabeth George, very well-respected kind of literary mystery writer out of England, talked about how, she's like 2/3 of the way through a whodunit, and then the person she thought did it, she's writing the book, didn't do it. And then she looked back through the book and the clues were all there along. So see, writing is a process of listening and paying attention and following our leaders and our readers and paying attention to new dots. And when we do, it's just this transcendent flow process where we're immersed in it and one with it, and we partner with it. We don't always plan or predict it if we make our life our lab. All right, next one on our notes is to quit watering dead plants. Quit watering dead plants. I will always remember an interview with Sark. And if you're familiar with Sark, she's a wildly creative writer who was really one of the first to say, I don't want just print on page. I want illustrations. I want to write in my own handwriting. I want some pages with just one word. And publishers are going, we don't do it this way. And she kept going until she found a publisher who would do it her way. And as a result, her singular style is something that is recognized and rewarded around the world. So I'm listening to Sark being interviewed by Jonathan Fields on the Good Life podcast. And she is talking about a very successful guy who got in touch with her and wanted to hire her to market his book. And she said, do you love your book? And he said, it got the biggest advance for business book ever given by Simon & Schuster. And she said, do you love your book? And he said, and I've hired a social media team that is going to be putting out tweets and posts every day and so forth. And she said, do you love your book? And he said, I am willing to spend almost to $500,000 in order to make this in New York Times. And she said, do you love your book? And he never answered the question. And she chose not to work with him. And his book showed up and disappeared a few weeks later, because this idea of watering dead plants, if the writing has become a grind, it's time to do something else. Because Robert Frost said, no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader, no joy in the writer, no joy in the reader. And if we are saying that writing is hard and a grind and the words aren't coming, and if we're gritting our teeth and if we're clenching our jaw, that's coming out in the writing. People aren't going to enjoy that. They're going to feel that resistance that we've got. So whether we get up and we go walking, whether we get up and put the book on a side and go out and interview people, whether we decide to maybe put this project and go to one that lights us up where the words are coming fast, it feels congruent, etc. It's just, do not keep watering dead plants. Pick some new plants, give those plants some fertilizer, do something instead of just continuing to grind at a work and meet a deadline and get it out in the world, because readers will feel what we're feeling. All right, next one on our notes is to find your third place. Find your third place. And now, are you familiar with the study of ergonomics? Ergonomics is the study of how our environment influences our effectiveness. And one of the things that ergonomics says is that we have a first place, a second place, and a third place. Our first place is usually our home. Our second place is usually our office. Well, if we try and write in our home, chances are we're distracted by our environment because we're thinking about the laundry and we're thinking about dinner and we're thinking about all those things. It's hard to focus because the environment keeps distracting us with what we normally do in that setting. Same with the office, is that we're thinking about our clients or we're interrupted by our coworkers. And if we have a home office, which is 1 and 2, sometimes it's hard to be creative in that place where we've got so many other obligations clamoring for our time and attention. A third place is a private place in public. It could be a local Starbucks. It could be a library. It could be a Barnes and Noble. It could be a Panera Bread. It is a place where you can go and people do not interrupt you. You get to feed off the energy in the room instead of supplying it all on your own. So instead of it being an isolated process, you're surrounded by people, but once again, they're not interrupting you. So you get this cocoon of concentration. Now, does the name Pavlov ring a bell? Some of these I just do for myself. Come on, I want a charity laugh. I'll say it again. Does the name Pavlov ring a bell? Okay. All right. I may have to abandon that one. It looks like it served its time here. So if every time we go to our third place, we only write on our project in that place. We do not check email. We do not text. We do not talk on the phone. No, we go there and we write. We go to our third place and we write. We go to our third place and we write. We go to our third place and write. Guess what? The third place becomes synonymous with working on our project. And just as Pavlov's dog salivated when he heard the bell, our muse answers the call when we go to our third place. All right, let's see. We have about 8 more minutes and we have 2 more rules. So, all right. Rule number 9, and let's go over them once again. Rule 1 is writing is our offering. 2, writing isn't done at a desk. 3, I missed 3, didn't I? Don't reread what you write. I missed 3. Okay. Number 3 is don't reread what you write. Because if we reread what we write, we'll rewrite what we've written. And at the end of the month, it won't necessarily be better. It will just be different. So rule number 3 is resist the urge to go back. When you come back to the project, your goal is to produce pages. Come back to the project, produce pages. Come back to the project, produce pages. That's when the voice comes out to play. Because if we reread, the critic comes out. Well, I'm not sure that's the right word. Oh, this could be a little tighter. And so at the end of the day, we have the same paragraph, just cleaned up a little bit. And then we come back again and, oh, well, yeah, that word isn't there. Oh, I think I'd like to add that. And at the end of the week, we have the same few pages, reworked. And they're not necessarily better. They're just different. And meanwhile, the creative voice has said bye-bye, because every time I come out and play, I get corrected. I get judged. There goes the juice. All right. So now we're on number 9. Okay. So 4 was comparisons cause us to quit. 5 is to write to connect, not to impress. 6 was to make your life your lab. 7 was to quit watering dead plants. And number 8 was to find your third place. Number 9 is to say what you're afraid to say. Sherry Turkle is a fantastic example of this. Sherry Turkle is an MIT professor who wrote Alone Together, and she wrote the #1 memoir last year, and that was Empathy Diaries. And I had an opportunity to interview Sherry, and I asked her the question that every memoirist deals with. I said, Sherry, in 17 years of Maui Writers Conference, every time a memoirist gave a keynote, someone in the audience would raise their hands and say, I have this story I want to tell, but I can't tell it because my mother will never talk to me again. Or, I'll ruin this relationship or whatever. And the memoirist would always say the same thing. Write the book. Just write it what wants to be said. And when you're finished writing and drafting that manuscript, then you can make a decision. reread it, and number one, you say, yeah, I'm not going to put this out there now. It's like, this relationship is more important. This is going to be damaging. I'm not going to risk it. It's not going to be worth it. Number two, you think, you know what? I can edit this. I don't have to say everything. I can leave this in. I can edit this a little bit so it's not throwing someone under the bus. Number three is that you go ahead and you publish it. And you know what? That it may damage your relationship with one person. However, it may help thousands of people. And we decide to serve the majority rather than the minority. So here's the question, is that say what you're afraid to say. So I asked Sherry Turkle, I said, okay, Sherry, what was the thing you thought, I couldn't say that? And you decided to say that anyway. And every memoirist I've ever interviewed has an answer like that. They don't even have to think about it. They know what it was because they had that Sturmendrang in their head dealing with it. And she spoke at the commencement. She gave the commencement address at Vassar. And her mother had taken her away from her father and had never explained why. So she really resented her mother. She built up the absentee father as this fantastic individual that she never got to meet. And she was very resentful and angry at her mother for doing that. And it came out at that graduation ceremony where her mom was walking in front of her. And she said, came out of my mouth something I wish I could take back. She said, Mom, everyone can see your hair clip. Why did you have that hair clip? It's so humiliating. It's so embarrassing to be with you when you're wearing that hair clip. And she never got a chance to apologize to her mom. And after her mom was gone, she researched and she found out that her father had been like a mad scientist. Now, I'm not talking out of school. It's in Sherry Turkle's book, Empathy Diaries. And he performed experiments on her. He would put her in a closet for 24 hours to see what happened. He would not talk to her for a couple of weeks to see what happened. And he was experimenting on her and doing great damage to her. So her mother, in an act of courage, did what she felt was right by her daughter and removed her daughter from that toxic situation. And the thing was, that book got the most favorable review of a memoir I have ever seen in the New York Times. Normally, the New York Times, they have to red pencil something or else why are they critics, right? They hardly ever give a glowing review. They have to find something wrong to earn their keep. The review in the New York Times of this book was stellar. It was a runaway success, and person after person got in touch with Sherry to say, thank you for saying that. I said something that I regretted to someone I love, and I have never been able to forgive myself for it. Thank you for daring to tell the truth. You know, I had done this, and as a result, people are so hungry for honesty. When we take ourselves off the pedestal and we dare to say the thing we think we cannot say, the more intimate we are, the more universal we are. And it's what the world needs, and it is part of our offering, to get down off the pedestal and to share the unpretty parts, because that's often where we connect around the human condition. And number 10. Number 10 is, if it's not on the calendar, it's not getting done. If it's not on the calendar, it's not getting done. Please, all of you, get out your phone right now. Or if you still have a wall calendar or something like that, get a wall calendar, get out a calendar. We're going to put a date on the calendar because, as Paulo Coelho said, one day we're going to wake up and there won't be any time left to do the things we've always wanted to do. Rene Ricard said, tomorrow is another day, but so is yesterday. John Legend said, the future is already here and we are already late. We're all busy. We've got responsibilities. We've got projects. We've got chores. We've got obligations. And so often the writing project just keeps getting put aside. Nope. This is your offering. Pablo Picasso said, the purpose of life is to find our gift, and the meaning is to give it away. I've met you. I know you have messages and stories and insights and lessons learned that will add value for people. It is not selfish to work on this project. It is smart. It is not an indulgence. It is your investment in contributing something that just might possibly make the day and be the right words at the right time for someone who desperately needs them. So get out your calendar. Now, it may not be a book. It may be a LinkedIn blog. Catherine Neiman just put up a wonderful post on our Facebook thing. Good for you, Catherine. And Mason, I see you on LinkedIn. Jennifer, you're doing great with your LinkedIn videos and so forth. Corinne, I want to see something from you so that I can share it. So what is a calendar date of when you will have something finishing out the world, some writing project, and it could be any length, just something, get it out of here and out there. Okay, we're going to quickly go through this because we've got about 3 more minutes left. So Mason, date, project, when are you going to get it out?
Sorry, you're on mute. There's an article I've been thinking of writing. It's fits into what I've been doing, and my plan is to have it out on LinkedIn and elsewhere by, I'm going to Florida on Monday, so I better finish it tomorrow.
Okay, so Mason, we have our Facebook community. Please, like Catherine did today, post it on Facebook community so that we can share it with our community and get some extra eyeballs and hearts on it. Okay.
Now, by tomorrow, I mean as late as a week from tomorrow.
Okay.
No. I'm shooting for tomorrow.
Okay. Anytime up until the end of the month works for us.
Okay.
So, okay. Corinne, how about you, please?
Okay. I write a lot, but I don't get it out very often. So that's kind of a concern. Probably this time next week. By this time next week, I'll put an article out, because I did ask about promoting it, and I wanted to make sure that it was good and that you would feel comfortable promoting it.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. And now when someone has their picture off, I'm thinking that they may be busy, just don't want to participate today. So if I'm wrong, in a moment, please unmute yourself and give us a date and something you'd like to get out in the world. And then I will wrap up with a quote from Colin Powell. And Colin Powell said that optimism is a force multiplier. Is that a great quote or what? Optimism is a force multiplier. Here is what can happen when you get something out of the world. I recently had a rewarding experience that reinforced this belief that optimism is a force multiplier. Celeste Mergens, founder of Days for Girls, reached out on LinkedIn to share the good news that she was going to be featured on Good Morning America for the International Day of Girls. I congratulated her and asked if we could set up a Zoom call to get caught up and to brainstorm how she could leverage this much welcome media opportunity. What I couldn't have predicted is she told me that something I told her at the Maui Writers Conference and that I said in my Tung Fu book 20 years ago changed her approach on how she tries to change behavior. She said, Days for Girls has received AARP's Purpose Prize. She has been selected as the Woman of the Decade by the World Economic Forum for her efforts to advocate on behalf of young girls around the world. She had been invited to a meeting of the head cutters in a small Uganda village. In case you're not familiar with this practice, UNICEF estimates 200 million women in 30 countries, including Indonesia, Yemen, and 27 African countries, undergo what's called FGM, female genital mutilation. At first, when Celeste got this invitation, she thought, I want no part of this. And then she thought, you can't change behavior if you're not in the room. So she accepted the invitation. She knew, though, no matter how much she personally disagreed with their tradition, if she criticized it, they would shut down and not even consider anything she said. So she said, I remembered what you said in your book. Instead of making people wrong, ask what if. Instead of using the word but, use the word and, so you're acknowledging what people say instead of arguing with it. So I asked questions instead of making assumptions. I asked, why do you have this tradition? And they told me it was a way for young girls to be surrounded by women to help them celebrate this rite of passage, that it was a tribal custom that had been passed down for generations. I said, oh, I understand why you have this tradition. And then I asked, what if you could keep this custom and cut out the cut? Suffice it to say, at first they crossed their arms and they frowned, and yet I continued to listen and ask questions instead of attack their customs. Long story short, within several months, the percentage of young girls undergoing this procedure dropped from 92% to 62%. And all because Celeste read something in a book that changed the way she helped leaders change customs that was costing the life of millions of girls. So, what's going to happen as a result of your book? Who's going to read it? How are they going to be a better parent or a leader or person because of it? How are they going to feel encouraged or supported? How are they going to feel seen or heard? All because you got these ideas and stories and lessons learned out of your head and into the world. And now, Irene, I think I see you. Do you have a date and a project you're going to get out in the world? Want to tell us about?
I do, and I'm going to have to compete with Mason for the end of, maybe it won't be Friday. By Sunday, I will have completed a course for Insight Timer that they've been asking me for the last over a year. So it's time, and I'd already given myself before December 17th when they close down for holidays, and I will move that up to the end of this week. And my book is being completed because I'm going somewhere to write it for January, February. So that I started working with you last year will be completed by the end of February.
Congratulations. This is wonderful to hear. Congratulations. And I hope that you will join us next week when we are going to have a book club discussion of Stephen Pressfield's book, The War of Art. And this is about identifying any resistance we might have and laying it down so that we can get our art out in the world where it can make a positive difference for others and a prosperous living for us. I am Sam Horn. I hope that you have enjoyed these writers' rules and maybe even post one so it's insight in mind. So the next time maybe those doubts start creeping in, it's like, look at your writer's rule and write on. Thank you. See you next time.